And this was a horrible moment for me. I was left feeling overwhelmed and powerless. My own child was being used to pressure me into a scheduling change that would rob me of my relationship with her. And I was emotionally blindsided. I lost my voice in that moment. I was unable to stand up for what I believed was best for my daughter, and I failed. I took the bait of emotional manipulation, and this is one of my biggest regrets, honestly.
Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your stepfamily from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
Understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork.
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of stepfamily life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want.
Welcome, everybody, back to another episode of the Blended Family Coaching Show. We're very excited that you are here with us. Now, we've been talking over the last few weeks about dealing with the other home, the ex and all of that.
It's
and
challenging.
we're going to continue that a little bit today. And, you know, we all want to have a nice, peaceful relationship with the other home, right? Mostly because we want our kids to experience peace between all their parents and step-parents. Like, we don't want to feel like they're suffering the consequences of our disagreements with an ex, right? Yeah.
That can be tough.
I mean, we really want a peaceful, cooperative working relationship, even if possible, a collaborative working relationship, right? And wouldn't that be awesome? You know, every once in a while, we do get to hear a story about two exes that have been able to work really well together. Somehow they've just kind of figured out how to set their differences aside and really keep the kids first, right? But unfortunately, most of the time, we actually really connect with people that the subject of the ex is just very, very different. And that was our personal experience as well. And it's really not a very pleasant story.
Yeah, we kind of have both sides of the story. For the first 10 years after my divorce, we co-parented really quite well. There was a lot of peace between the two homes, and then there was the sudden shift, and we're going to talk about that in a bit. Yeah, it was kind of
half and half. Yeah, you're right. You know, deep hurts from the past, disagreements about what's best for the kids, and even a focus on getting back at each other sometimes are just a few of the things that come up over and over. It can seem like no matter what we say or how much we flex or how careful we are about our words or how wisely we hold to our boundaries, the ex is just going to disagree with everything that we put out there, right?
Yeah, it's just this uphill battle.
I know, yeah. And we realize that ultimately the ones who are really hurting are the kids. We know there's got to be a better way, but honestly, it just feels impossible. You know, Kim and I know how that feels, don't we, honey?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Our daughter was stuck in the middle.
We spent several years trying to respond to the ugliest emails, texts, and phone conversations in a way that might lead toward a peaceful interaction. But it seemed like no matter what we said or did, it was always met with disagreement and opposition.
Yeah, there was no way to reason.
No. So, you know, finally, we started really owning the fact that we could never change Kim's ex. He is who he is, and ultimately it's his responsibility to change himself. But we did begin to discover how we could handle ourselves in a way that kept reasonably clear boundaries and just kind of started shutting down that really toxic interaction that had become a pattern. So that's what we're here to share about today. Some insights around how we approached Kim's disagreeable ex in a way that helped us maintain our sanity as much as it was up to us, and tried to keep the peace between the two homes for Annika's sake, right? Your daughter's sake.
Yeah, it was really tough.
Now, there's a lot to talk about. Like, this is a huge concept, right? But today we're just going to focus on two primary things. One, containing the conflict. How do we contain it? And two, holding your ground, you know, having reasonable and healthy boundaries. And we're going to give you a few suggested scripts, some things that you might think about saying, you know, and you might be thinking, oh man, I need to remember that when we say it. But you might be in the car or doing household chores. Maybe you're out for a run. We know the gyms are closed, so you're not working out at the gym right now. But you might not really be in a place where you can sit down and take notes.
As you're listening.
So not to worry. We've got you covered. You can head over and download your free copy of our cheat sheet for this episode.
Yeah.
And we've written all the scripts down. We've put them in one handy dandy download.
Yep.
So just go over to support.mikeandkimcoaching.com/033. That's our episode number 033. And you can grab your copy completely free today. And of course, we'll link to that in the show notes as well to make that.
We want you to have what took us years to figure out. And there you have it. So I just want to say up front that this is not easy.
Yeah.
We're not sugarcoating any of this. We're going to get to the nitty gritty because this is hard. You know, you and your ex probably have a long list of past offenses against each other, maybe some lingering pain or bitterness. There's probably some distrust, and maybe even there's some envy between the two of you.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah. And maybe it's not outward aggression between you two, but you just can't seem to agree, or there's some passive aggressive tensions going on. There could be other things going on under the surface that are just as toxic. But regardless of the relational dynamics, because you have a past and you know each other well, it can be really easy to antagonize and push each other's buttons when those tensions do arise, when you have to make a decision. And you know what? Your ex, they know what words to use that are going to cut you down, and you know exactly how to strike back. But the last thing we want to do is stay stuck in these destructive cycles that really what they do is they cut off any productive communication between the two of you. Now, we know you don't have control over how your ex reacts or how they behave towards you, but you can control yourself. And you can choose to respond with professionalism and courtesy. Those are some key words we're going to be using throughout.
Those are hard words in this subject matter. Yeah.
You want to ask yourself, am I being professional and courteous? Because over time, this can lead to better communication and more cooperation between the two of you. All right, so let's discover some effective tools we want to share with you today that are going to really help to break those cycles of conflict and move you towards something better with your parenting coalition, something that's going to create more peace for you and especially more peace for the kids. And first, we're going to talk about conflict containment. Really important. Now, conflict containment starts with controlling your own speech.
Wait, whose speech?
Your own speech.
That's right. Darn it.
Yeah. That's the only person you can control, right? So with my ex, when I was in a conversation with him, I could always tell when this conversation was getting off track. I could feel the tension rising, and I realized this is not a productive conversation.
Yeah, we're about on the brink there, right? Yep.
And we probably weren't going to be able to come to any agreeable solution. So when you find yourself in a disagreeable conversation, you feel it going that way with your ex, do your best to avoid engaging in this big prolonged argument. You don't need to go there. So here's a simple statement that I used to say to my ex when the conflict started to surface and I knew that a reasonable solution just wasn't in the cards for us on that particular day. I would say, I guess we'll just have to agree to disagree for now.
That seems overly simple.
It is simple.
Yeah.
But this approach is great because it actually de-escalates the conversation and it leaves you both on equal ground, right? I didn't have to agree with his point of view. He didn't have to agree with mine, but we could agree to just disagree and let it go for now.
So you're not saying, well, your idea stinks.
No,
and,
you're not listening
and I'm ignoring
to them.
you.
Yeah.
You're just saying I'm agreeing to disagree. So you keep your idea, I'll keep mine, and let's push pause, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Before it turns into a big, huge, unproductive conversation that we don't need. Keep in mind, it's impossible to have a reasonable conversation with someone who's become unreasonable. And you know what? The same goes for you. If you feel yourself becoming irritated or unreasonable, if some really negative emotions start coming up in the conversation, it's time to simply end the conversation in a respectful way. You don't want to hang up or be rude or snarky.
Oh, like the old days of the phone where you could slam the phone down. Now it's just a button.
Yeah. You want to do it in a respectful way. I guess we'll just have to agree to disagree for now. And this will give everyone some time to cool off and calm down. The point here really is that pushing a conversation to the brink of disaster just to win an argument, it's going to lead to relational destruction. It's going to blow up.
Yep.
And honestly, there are no winners when your parenting coalition breaks down. In fact, it can be really difficult to recover from the damage of even one destructive conversation.
That's right.
You're just adding more tension.
And that's not just for you and your ex. It's really for your kids, ultimately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead, choose to take the high road and respectfully end a conversation when it starts to become unproductive or hostile.
Yeah.
Just don't even go there. Now, the funny thing about this is sometimes that issue that you're about to have this huge argument over is really no big deal. It's something super small and petty, and it really doesn't matter to either of you. You're just kind of antagonizing each other, and you want to have the last word or whatever is going on. You're having a bad day. And
yeah, you get to that point where you're focused more on the emotion than you are about the actual issue itself.
Yeah. And then after a couple of days go by, you realize, wow, that wasn't any big deal at all.
Like, who cares?
Why did we even go there?
Yeah.
Now, other times, the issue is really important. It's something that needs to be resolved. So you'll need to revisit it at another time when things aren't so emotionally charged and you're able to really focus on what's best for the kids.
Yeah.
So taking this pause can give you an opportunity to kind of strategize or, think about other options. You may need to seek advice around the issue.
Yeah.
But if you have major disputes, you and your ex, that just can't be resolved between the two of you, mediation is a really great option. I mean, this is actually affordable and it's usually pretty effective. It's great at promoting peace between the two of you and working through your differences without having to lawyer up.
Nobody's lawyering up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think too, watching what's happening in the patterns, right? It's great to use this agree to disagree to press pause before it, we hit that disastrous point of our argument. But if this is really an important issue and it keeps coming, you keep coming around to it, but then you're finding yourself 3-4 times going, I guess we'll just have to agree to disagree, and you keep having to press it, that might be an indicator that it's time to get a third party involved. And that might just be a way for you to kind of frame around, well, when do I know how to reach out for mediation or something like that? It's when you see that pattern happening over and over on the important issues, not the little petty things, but the important issues that you just can't seem to find any resolution around, and you're constantly pressing pause. Just a thought about how to think through that.
I also want to point out that the agree to disagree technique can be used to set a clear boundary. If you've got verbal abuse or bullying, harassments, or false accusations that are coming your way from your ex, or really anyone in your parenting coalition, if you can agree to disagree and then politely just end the conversation, you can communicate two things to the other party. First, that you don't agree with their misguided beliefs about you, whatever it is they're throwing out there. And you're also letting them know that you're not going to allow them to continue their verbal attack. So in doing this, you'll be getting what you need, which is a break from the verbal abuse, without having to defend yourself or stoop to their level of aggression. You don't want to go there. So promoting peace and cooperation also means protecting yourself from any toxic interactions. That's not okay. You need to set some boundaries. And if you want to dive deeper into boundaries, which are absolutely critical, by the way, when you're dealing with an ex in the other home, if you think you may have a boundary problem, or if you're not even sure what healthy boundaries look like, go back and listen to episode number 27. It's called How to Set Clear Boundaries and Safeguard Relationships. And we're going to put a link to that in the show notes for you.
Yeah, that's a good one to review. Now we want to be absolutely clear on something here. This whole idea of agreeing to disagree is not permission to avoid issues or sweep them under the rug.
No.
Like sometimes we don't want to have to deal with something, so we find this little tool that helps us not deal with it. That's not what it is. It's not trying to dodge a disagreement and hope that it's just going to go away. It's simply a tool to keep disagreements from turning into full-blown battles. and then purposefully evaluating how you can take the best next step. So don't let this become a habit of avoidance, but it's really something that you use care and intentionality and purpose to use.
Yeah, good point.
Okay. So, we've been focused on containing conflict between two exes, but there could be other members of our parenting coalition that are engaging in conflict, right? Maybe our ex has been remarried for a while, and so the step parent is getting involved in the other home, and that can sometimes fuel a fire that can be challenging. Or, there's other pieces of our coalition that exist, like grandparents and aunts and uncles and all kinds of, and even like really close family friends that are kind of sided with the other side. That can be really challenging. And so you might need to do some work with your ex to also help the rest of the coalition to stay in their corners and kind of do what they're supposed to do. What we really need to realize is that any strong tension between either side in a parenting coalition can put a child in the middle. And our job is to protect them. So as we're going through these few episodes kind of focused on this tension between our kids' two homes, keep in mind that the parenting coalition could be greater than just you and your ex. Now, one way to keep yourself in the headspace that's going to allow you to respond from a place of security, and you want to be in some emotional strength as well, so that you can agree to disagree and use that strategy with purpose. It's learning how to stop taking the bait. It's hard when your ex or anyone in that parenting coalition is having a bad day and they've decided, I think I'm going to take it out on you. Right?
You're an easy target, that's for sure.
Or maybe they're just pushing your buttons and trying to get you all worked up. Some people find that really amusing. They could be harboring old resentment, or maybe they're mad at you and they're just trying to retaliate somehow, right? That can be a direct attack against your character. Maybe they're hurling insults or false accusations, or it could be a little more insidious or passive aggressive, maybe even vocalizing some underhanded comments about you to the kids or other mutual acquaintances. Personal attacks can come in lots of different ways, right? Yeah. But when these poisonous jabs are directed at you, you've got to make a decision. Are you going to take the bait and allow yourself to get dragged under by this, emotional sea of upset that's really going to result in some unnecessary conflict? Because remember, that's probably what they want. They want to get you riled up. And sometimes an ex might intentionally antagonize you just to get you to react with anger, so that way they can turn around and use your reaction against you. That can be really true when there's legal things that are going on, or you're trying to get through stuff with the court system, right?
Yeah, they're looking for ammunition.
So really the choice is simple. Rather than choosing to take the bait, you're going to choose not to take the bait, right? You can choose to focus on a behavioral solution to the problem rather than staying stuck in the emotions of who's right or who's wrong. Okay?
Yeah.
So let's kind of unpack that a little bit and talk about what that actually means. It's so easy. When we take the bait, usually we're just stuck in the emotions of everything, and we're not actually making progress on whatever the problem or the issue is. So let's just take a look at a really small problem, and then we can talk a little bit more about it. So let's say your ex just called you and they're really rude and they're accusing you of being irresponsible. Okay. So the accusation is your level of responsibility. But the real issue is, well, they noticed that you forgot to pack the kids' soccer shoes when you brought them back from their visitation. Okay. Now you can choose to take the bait and you can get upset and you can start having the conversation about who's responsible and who's not, right? Or you can choose not to take the bait. You can move quickly past that and go right to a behavioral solution with something like, hey, I'm really sorry the soccer shoes didn't get packed. Would you like me to bring them to you, or would you rather pick them up here? Right? That's a behavioral solution. The issue is the soccer shoes aren't there. And there's two choices. I can bring them or you can come and get them. Right? And remember, you might not want to say it the way I just said it. You want to keep your tone professional and courteous, right?
Monotone.
So it might be something more like, hey, you know what? I'm really sorry that the soccer shoes didn't get packed. Do you want me to bring them by, or would it be easier for you to just pick them up here? Right? And just keep staying focused on the solution to the problem. Just because they're having a bad day doesn't mean you have to have a bad day, right? Don't allow them to steal your joy or bring you down just because they're trying to get you to take the bait. We're so excited to let you know about something brand new we've created just for you.
We've realized that with so many episodes available here on the show, it might feel a bit overwhelming to find the topics that matter most to you. That's why we've created a simple tool for you to receive a personalized playlist focused on your current struggle or your biggest challenge.
That's right. It's called the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz. You'll answer just a few questions, and based on your responses, we'll email you a curated custom playlist of episodes that are specific to you.
This simple quiz will direct you to the most impactful episodes that pertain to you personally and keep you on track in your journey of discovery, learning, and growth. So, scroll all the way to the bottom of the show notes for this episode and click the link to take the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz today.
Okay, let's get back to the discussion.
Yeah, you don't even have to acknowledge the jab.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Notice we didn't even say anything about who's responsible and who's not. Yeah. And so don't take the bait. This approach is going to help you immediately shift the focus from conflict to problem solving, but only if you're able to keep your focus on that initial problem and just simply ignore the insult, like Kim just said.
Let them bounce.
Now, some might think that this is kind of a position of weakness. You know, if they're attacking you, then you need to strike back and set them straight, right?
Yeah.
But the question we really need to ask ourselves is why?
Yeah. Why do we even care?
Yeah. Is there a solid reason that they need to think differently about me than they actually do? I mean, usually there really isn't a solid reason. We're just wanting to maybe one-up them or hurt them. Or, you know, sometimes we do feel frustrated because we don't want them to see us in a negative light. And I get that. And I know that that can be painful.
Yeah.
If there really isn't an actual problem to solve, then you may have to go back to that agree to disagree strategy and just simply end the conversation as politely and courteously as you possibly can. And ultimately, when you take that type of approach, it actually puts you in a stronger position.
Definitely.
You remain more secure, more confident. You're not getting drugged down into the mire of all the lies and the craziness that's going on. And you're just confident in the truth about who you are, rather than worrying about who they think you might be.
And, you know, the truth is that arguing with them is not going to change their mind.
Yeah.
I mean, has that ever worked in the
Never worked
past?
in the past. That's right. Yep.
I mean, that was a freeing revelation for me, is that I'm not responsible for what my ex thinks of me.
Yeah.
If they want to think negative things, that's their deal, but I don't have to set them straight.
And imagine this. So we're at this stage now where Kim's daughter, Annika, is out of the house. She's 24 now. And let me ask you, like, how much does your ex's opinion of you matter now at this stage?
Nothing.
like it's totally
not even on my radar.
So as real and present and frustrated as it might be when your kids are, 6, 7, 10, even 15, 16 years old, it's just going to be a handful of years before it really isn't going to matter that much anymore.
Yeah, I think there's two things at play there. One is that you had a child or children with this person. You had a bond with them. You had a deep relationship. So a part of you will probably always care a little bit what they think of you. I think it's hard to just turn that off and not care. That's a process and it takes time.
Good point.
And the other hard thing is that I know for me, I would think, well, if he thinks these horrible negative things about me, then he's probably telling my daughter those things or telling other people, spreading that around. And, sometimes that was the case. Actually, that was proven to be the case. Sure. Right. But in the big picture, kids and people figure things out. My daughter knows my character. She knows who I am. And that's what matters, not what he says about me.
The more you can simply be who you are, rather than try to convince your ex of who you are, the clearer that's going to become to the kids.
Yeah. And what I really learned with my ex was that when I ignored his attacks and I didn't react the way he wanted, when I refused to take his bait, that this really frustrated him.
So that was your way of getting back?
Yeah, well, eventually he slowed his attempts to hurt me. He backed off because he wasn't getting the results he really wanted, which was to drag me down and emotionally control me, just like he did when we were married. So you can actually start to shut down a toxic ex with this approach of not taking the bait.
Yeah.
So I just want to encourage you, if you're in this situation, I feel for you. This is so tough, but stay secure and don't buy into their misguided opinions and the lies about you. You really don't need to defend yourself or explain yourself to your ex. And you know what? This usually doesn't help the situation anyway. It only prolongs that unproductive conversation and increases the conflict, right? Sometimes we just need to ask ourselves, if reasoning in this way, has it ever worked with this person in the past, even when you were together? Well, if it didn't work then, it's most likely not going to work now. Okay, there are probably some good reasons why you're no longer together, and dysfunctional communication, that's probably at the top of the list. So you don't need to go there. Don't even dignify the poison and the pettiness with a response. Just don't. It's not worth it.
Yeah, I mean, we can't say that enough. Right.
Yeah.
And really the ultimate goal is just to stay focused on the kids.
Yeah.
What's best for the kids? And when we get sucked into those emotional conversations, we're getting off topic, right? Because meeting their needs and caring for them is really what's most important. So when the ex throws those insults or tries to push your buttons, you don't have to take the bait. You can stay focused on the kids and let the rest go.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes exes are really overly critical.
Oh, yeah.
And they're showing a pattern of strong disrespect and aggressive behavior. And you've got to attempt to set some healthy boundaries with these.
Definitely.
Now, one way to talk with your ex and really keep the negotiation about building cooperation rather than just pointing fingers about frustrations is that you don't want to react emotionally. So we've been talking about that, not taking the bait, and keeping your mindset on those two words that Kim mentioned before of being professional and courteous.
Regardless of how they're acting.
That's right. You can calmly say something like this. Look, I really want us to work as a team for the benefit of the kids. And I've noticed that lately communication between us has been really tense. And when our conversations escalate, it's difficult for either of us to respond in a way that's really helping them. What do you think might be happening here? Okay.
Yeah.
Remember, professional and courteous, as well as actually being genuine in your request to hear their side of the issues. Yeah. Okay. What you're trying to do here is helping them to focus on the fact that the kids are the focal point of what we're trying to resolve. And then you're saying, hey, tell me a little bit about what's going on your side. Okay. Even with the most difficult exes, there are times when they might be able to give you something that indicates what's going on underneath. Okay. Don't lose hope. Like Kim was talking about how they haven't necessarily been able to communicate before. So what makes you think they're going to communicate now? That's absolutely true most of the time, but also have hope that people can change.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people can. And all it takes sometimes is a professional, courteous, kind, and genuine response in order to get them to do that. So we're going to include that simple script into the cheat sheet we mentioned earlier. You can head over to the website. We're going to link to that in the show notes, and feel free to just tweak it or use it to fit your situation. And you might even want to practice it. You can practice it with your current spouse in the mirror or whatever, trying to just get this right. Remember, it's the kids you're really working for.
Yeah. And you're calling attention to the communication between the two of you. You're not casting blame. You're not pointing fingers. You're really trying to figure out a way to communicate better. And if they do have something to say, just let them talk. Just listen.
Yeah.
Maybe they just need to vent about something they're unhappy about and get it out and on the table. And hopefully that could help to dissipate some of the anger or whatever is going on.
Yeah. Now, some of you I know are just about ready to reach for the stop button and stop listening to this because you're going, no, you don't get it. My ex will, resort to extreme verbal abuse and whatnot.
We've been there.
And the reality is in those cases, you may need to just really limit your communication. I'm someone who really doesn't like a lot of text and email communication, but I know there's a time when things get so toxic that you need to resort to just written communication. And in fact, we didn't have as much of this when we were going through many years ago. But I know most states now even have a monitored system where you work through virtually like email, but it's actually monitored by the authorities to make sure our communication is actually getting healthier. So try that, try to work through texts and emails. And if the written communication is really toxic and painful as well, you might need to just add a provision in your parenting plan that, prevents that behavior, and then see if you can get into one of those systems that I was just talking about. One of the things we did, we put it in the parenting plan, but it was really hard to manage. And so for a while, when Kim's ex was really working really toxically through email,
just beating me up,
I had to be the one who stand in the gap. And I read the emails and I deciphered what Kim actually needed to know.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, someone who's a little bit more emotionally removed might help you stand in the gap and protect you from some of the toxins that are going through that.
And help you to respond back in a professional and courteous way.
Yeah, I did a little bit of that as well. So there's lots of different options, even for those exes that are way over the top in the way that they communicate. You still can be professional and courteous and find ways to really fight for peace for your coalition.
And if you do need an advocate, it may not be the step parent that's the best person.
That's right.
Mike happens to be a really level-headed guy, and
sometimes,
my ex didn't really get to him.
Yeah.
But you don't want to put the step parent in that position if they can't handle it.
True.
It may need to be someone else.
Yeah.
That helps you screen.
Yeah. And that was where I said, somebody who is a little bit more emotionally removed.
Yes.
Sometimes step parents, you're right. That's a great point, because they can fuel the fire, right? They can be like, let's tell them this and let's tell them that.
No,
so be careful.
That. Yeah. You want a very, a neutral person as much as possible that can subjectively look at the situation and determine what's important and what's not in those communications.
Yeah. So we're learning how to contain the conflict by using that agree to disagree strategy. We're doing everything we can to not take the bait. And we're doing our best to actually focus on, hey, how can we communicate better, as opposed to getting lost in all the maybe inconsequential arguments that we have. So let's keep going. What else can we do to deal in these situations?
Okay, well, let's talk about one more challenging aspect of coping with a difficult ex. And this is where you might find yourself in a situation where you're feeling pressured into making a snap decision, or they're really pressing on your boundaries. They're really pushing in on you. And this could be around something small, or it might be about a bigger decision. And you're possibly pushed to engage in a conversation, and you're forced to negotiate about something that you're really not prepared or ready to discuss at that time. And they're kind of putting you on the spot. And if you've got an ex that's controlling, you probably already know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Controlling people are really skilled at using the element of surprise to kind of jump in and manipulate a situation that throws us off guard, so that they're able to tactfully kind of persuade us, or even sometimes it's more of a demand that we make a decision, even though we're feeling really emotional. They've triggered some emotions, and whatever emotions they've been able to stir up in that moment, we aren't really thinking as clearly as we should be. And this can be a really challenging situation. And I have a personal example I want to share with you. And you might think that this example is extreme, and it is, granted.
Yeah.
But we never thought in a million years, in our wildest dreams, that this could ever happen to us. But it did. And dynamics can change with an ex. Unfortunately, things can really shift. So, for 10 years following my divorce, my ex and I, we co-parented relatively well. We had a great cooperative relationship, and for the most part, things were pretty peaceful between us. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree.
Yeah. We had a 50-50 visitation schedule that seemed to be working well for everyone. And our daughter, Annika, she was doing great.
She was doing pretty well,
She was flourishing. But when Annika turned 12, my ex had a sudden attitude shift towards me. He believed that the time that Annika spent with me and with my family in our home, that it needed to be radically reduced. For whatever reasons, we still don't know what was behind his reasoning. We have no idea.
He never gave a rational reason, not to us, not to the courts. And
nothing ever happened. There wasn't a big blowout. It just suddenly shifted. And there we were. So this is how it kind of got kicked off. My ex requested a meeting with me alone. But when I showed up, he actually wasn't alone. He had brought our daughter with him.
And again, she was 12.
She was 12 at the time, yeah. So he kind of took her by the shoulders and he positioned her right in front of me. And then he instructed her, tell your mom what you want. And I'll never forget, it was awful. Annika kind of stared at the floor. She was really nervous. I could tell she was upset. And he continued to prompt her until she finally said, in a really kind of flat, monotone voice, I want to live at my dad's house now. And I was absolutely blindsided. And I was just flooded with all kinds of emotions. It was
How could that not kick up some
it was
really
an awful
deep emotions?
moment. Yeah. And the strangest thing was my daughter, who I had a really tight relationship with, she couldn't even look me in the eye. She was looking at the floor. She was shuffling her feet. And I just didn't get it. I couldn't understand why she would make this request. I was just absolutely blown away. So then my ex, he went on and on, to talk about how this would be the best thing for Annika. And if I really loved her, I'd agree with this new arrangement and it's what she wants. And, of course, that was his opinion, but he was just really going at it hard. And he believed that my daughter really didn't need to spend time with me. And it was very difficult. And even in that moment of confusion, I tried really hard to assess the situation, but my emotions seemed to override reality. I was stunned. I was hurt. I was concerned. I was confused. It just all hit at once. And at this point, it seemed that I'd been stripped of any authority to even make a decision. That's how it felt. As if my opinion didn't even matter. And I was simply just expected to go along with this plan that they had already mapped out.
Well, that he made.
Yeah, and forced on her. And unfortunately, our parenting plan was not specific enough to support my parental authority around the visitation schedule. So I wasn't protected in that way. And this was a horrible moment for me. I was left feeling overwhelmed and powerless. My own child was being used to pressure me into a scheduling change that would rob me of my relationship with her. It was just crazy now when I think about it.
Yeah.
And I was emotionally blindsided. I lost my voice in that moment. I was unable to stand up for what I believed was best for my daughter, and I failed. I took the bait of emotional manipulation, and this is one of my biggest regrets, honestly, because this one meeting where I was pressured to make a decision on the spot that I wasn't ready to make, this one meeting eventually led to parental alienation and a painful battle in the court system that lasted 3 years. And this whole situation was extremely detrimental to my daughter. And, if you aren't sure, I threw this term out, parental alienation. If you aren't sure about that, that's an extreme situation, but unfortunately it happens all too often, especially when we're dealing with an unstable ex and we aren't vigilant around our parenting plan or our boundaries. So if you want to know more about that, we're going to link a blog article on parental alienation so that you can learn more about what that is. And hopefully that is not your situation.
Yeah, that's right. And some of you might be listening and going, yeah, I can really relate. You've been in that situation. Others maybe are listening and feeling like, man, that's a really difficult, sad story. But I just can't see myself ever getting there. And I just want to remind you, at the beginning, Kim reminded us that, hey, we had no idea. Like, we never expected that. In fact, the first 10 years was fine.
Yeah,
Things were going along fine.
We threw mutual birthday parties together. We sat together at our events. Yeah.
So if you're in that season where things are going really well, it might be even more important for you to really be listening as we talk through some of this, because if something blindsides you like this, you want to be prepared ahead of time. Part of the reason Kim says, like, in that moment, this was kind of that catalyst that was a struggle. She just wasn't prepared for it and had no idea how to respond.
I wasn't expecting it.
Now, we definitely hope nothing like that would ever happen to you. But let's talk a little bit about what to do when you are in those situations where you feel the pressure to make a decision and you're just not ready to make that.
Yeah.
First, you want to press pause on pressure.
Definitely.
Right? So when you're in the situation where you're not thinking clearly, emotions are really high, you're feeling pressured, it is honestly time to just push pause for a second. You might just excuse yourself from the conversation, even if it's just long enough to say, I really got to go to the bathroom, right?
Yeah.
And to go in there and calm down and allow your emotions to level off. That's okay. And it's even okay to come back out and insist that, you know what, we need to reschedule this discussion for a little bit of a later time, right? In the bathroom, maybe you're thinking through it going, I need more information.
Yeah.
Maybe, for us, when we need to calm down, prayer is a big piece for us. We need to take some time to pray about it. Whatever that might be, it's okay to come back out and say, hey, we're going to push pause and we're going to come back to this tomorrow or the next day. And it gives you the opportunity to process through the possible options. And we mentioned this before on the agree to disagree, but it also gives you an opportunity to seek counsel, maybe from your spouse you need to talk to, maybe a trusted friend, a coach, a lawyer, a pastor, somebody who might be able to help you figure out what your next move might need to be.
Yeah, this can be really confusing. I mean, in hindsight, I should have never engaged in a conversation with my ex about the schedule, especially in front of our daughter. Ugh.
Yeah, like we had already known that for years not to do that, but you still were stuck, weren't you?
I was really stuck. I felt emotionally paralyzed in that moment. But I should have never allowed myself to be pressured, and I wish that I would have responded by saying that I needed some time to think about this and just stuck to my guns on that. But because I was blindsided and my emotions were elevated, I just was not thinking clearly. I felt trapped and unable to respond well. Now, since then, I've learned a lot about how to handle emotions, especially when you're in a highly charged, pressure-filled situation with your ex. And that brings us to your next step. And that's all around examining your emotions. You really want to take some time to process through these heightened emotions that come up. Beware of making any decisions based on fear or guilt or any other emotion.
Pressure.
Yes, or pressure. We all experience anger and disappointment and frustration when we're navigating decisions with an ex. This is all normal, but it's not okay for anyone, including your kids, to use fear or guilt or anything negative to influence or manipulate your decisions. You see, at that fateful meeting with my ex and my daughter, I was fearful that my daughter would resent me if I didn't agree to this new schedule. I mean, it seems strange to even say it now.
Even though you knew that's not really what she wanted.
Yeah, that's really not the truth. But in that moment, that's how I felt. That's what I was buying into. And I also just didn't want to rock the boat or deal with conflict. So I was fearful of my ex's explosive temper. But since then, I've learned that making decisions based on fear is never a good thing. I always regret those decisions. And as it turns out, my ex was systematically and intentionally alienating my daughter from me.
That was parental alienation.
Yeah. He was deceiving and manipulating Annika. He was using her. So emotional and psychological abuse was underlying this entire situation, but I couldn't see it in the moment because I allowed myself to cave under the pressure.
Yeah. We don't want to get lost in this idea that, keeping the peace at all costs is what's best.
No.
And we get misaligned in what keeping the peace really means. Just because we're not having explosive arguments doesn't necessarily mean there's peace.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to rock the boat.
Yeah.
As much as we hate that, as much as we don't want to deal with that, but we don't want to end up having the boat sink because we weren't willing to rock it a little bit, right?
Yeah, that's what happened to us. Our boat sank.
Yeah, and here's the thing. It is possible to hold your ground and make a good decision while still being cooperative and peaceful.
Yeah.
Right? Even if your ex has a really bad temper, they lash out at you, you can still maintain your own self-control, and you can choose not to take the bait, and you can agree to disagree in a way that's professional and courteous.
Yeah.
And when you need to get other professionals involved, you can do that same thing.
Yeah. Now, I wish back then that I'd called a timeout, rescheduled the meeting, and taken the time to process through those tough emotions I was experiencing. I could have talked things over with you, honey.
Yep.
I could have made a decision based on what was best for Annika rather than allowing my fears to take over and to let myself be pressured in that moment. This could have led to a better decision, and our family might have avoided years and years of pain, and I could have protected my daughter. So please don't avoid or ignore your emotions, even if they're painful.
Yeah.
Your emotions need to be explored. They need to be expressed before you make any important decisions. You want to make your decisions based on your values, not on these heightened emotions. So when you're able to process through them and truly decide what you believe is best for your child, that's when the right decision is going to emerge, when you get beyond all those emotions. But don't allow your ex or your child to pressure you into making a decision when you're emotionally charged or when you're feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah.
It's just not a good time.
Yeah.
And that brings us to another point. You know, your kids should never be involved in issues that need to be worked out between
Annika
adults.
should not have been in the middle of that. You're right.
No. So here's something really simple that you can say to your child if they've somehow been put into the middle of decision making and they're inappropriately trying to influence you. You can say, listen, honey, your dad and I are the ones who will be making these kinds of decisions because we're the adults. You don't need to worry about it because we're capable of choosing what's best for you.
Yeah, those are really good and simple words that you can use with your kids, and even sounding, like a broken record and just continuing. If they continue to push, just saying that kind of thing over and over of, hey, you don't have to worry about this. I'll work with your other parent and we'll figure this out. And, if kids are being put in the middle of all of this, we want to highly recommend that you consider getting them into counseling. They might need a neutral third party, a resource. There's probably a counselor at their school, and often that can be an effective way to get started, just helping kids work through their emotions without them having to worry about hurting either of their parents.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, it was a caring counselor that actually helped Annika to make sense of what was going on so that she could eventually stand up for what she really wanted, and she was no longer being manipulated or used or put in the middle. And you might want to go back and listen to episodes 7 and 8, which are all about how to support and understand your kids if you do have a toxic ex who's either hurting the kids or trying to turn them against you. That would be good to go back and listen to. Now, like I said in the beginning, everything that we've talked about today is not easy. This is tough stuff. And sometimes we tend to slide back into those old patterns of allowing our ex to be verbally abusive or controlling or pressure us. And it can be exhausting to contain the conflict and to hold your ground. But we want you to know that you can consistently practice everything that we talked about today. And a great way to go about this is to use your kids' health and well-being to motivate you when you are feeling exhausted.
Definitely. That's the goal, right?
Yeah, because that can keep you on track when you're facing these difficult situations with your ex. Because here's the bottom line. Kids need their parents to peacefully work together, whether they're married, divorced, or remarried. Now, research clearly confirms that children are able to successfully adjust to the ending of their parents' marriage and cope reasonably well if the following circumstances exist. First, if the parents are able to bring their marital relationship to a close without excessive conflict. Second, when children are not put into the middle of whatever conflict still does exist. And third, when there's a commitment from both parents to cooperate on issues of the children's material, physical, educational, and emotional welfare. You see, high conflict step families and conflict between their parents can negatively impact children, and it burdens them with undue emotional anxiety and stress that they just aren't equipped to deal with. So keep your focus on the kids and do your part to create peace and maintain cooperation between their two homes. Do your part.
That's right. Sometimes all you can do is your part. And maybe it feels impossible to reach some of those things Kim just mentioned, but just doing your part and keeping your side of the street clean is one of the terms you use a lot.
That's your responsibility.
It is really good. All right. So we packed a lot into this episode. I know it ran a little longer than some of our episodes usually do. And I want to remind you that we've got you covered. You didn't have to sit down with pen and paper and write everything down and all that, because we've got that free cheat sheet over there on our website with those different scripts in it. And we've linked to that in the show notes. So this week we want you to start practicing how you're going to contain the conflict and hold your ground well, regardless of how your ex chooses to respond. So work on that this week, and then meet us back over here next week for a special episode that's going to be just for moms and stepmoms.
Yeah,
and you might know exactly why. All right. That finally brings this episode to a wrap.
Until next time.